Hello everyone, this is the Afro Avenger here with another episode of albums that I listened to this week. I know this is kind of late, it's on Sunday, but this is the only time I was able to actually make a video. Anyways, I'll probably say this at the beginning of every video, but I always try to listen to at least one new album a day, and as a way to show off some of the stuff I've been listening to, I'll make a video showing off, each album that I listen to throughout the week. So, we have quite a few this episode, so we'll get to it right now. So yeah, let's get started. The first album is Post-Pop Depression by Iggy Pop. This is Iggy Pop's latest release from this year, and this album proves that the godfather of punk still got it. This was an incredible record, very dark, but really intense as well. It takes the same kind of art punk from the mid-'80s and brings it into this era. With Iggy collaborating with some really fine talent like Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, as well as Arctic Monkeys drummer Matt Helders. I could definitely hear a lot of David Bowie influence on this album, as Iggy and David were rather close back in the old days, but yeah, really cool record, definitely one of my favorites from this year. The next album was the Hamilton soundtrack. My girlfriend has been in love with the soundtrack for months, and I finally got around to listening to it all the way through. I remember seeing the live performance at this year's Grammy Awards and was greatly impressed by how they could bring hip-hop to the world of Broadway. Lin-Manuel Miranda truly is a creative force with this quirky musical, taking the story of Alexander Hamilton and the American Revolution and blending it with hip-hop and R&B. The rapping is actually really good in this musical, and I certainly wouldn't mind seeing it live in New York. The next album was Rain and Blood by Slayer, one of the most important thrash metal records ever recorded, and by none other than one of the big four of thrash metal, Slayer. Rain and Blood was a really cool album, very heavy and aggressive, as one might expect of a thrash metal record. It was released in 1986, so of course metal was still developing. Now this may be Slayer's third record, but this album was actually their first major label debut album, so in that way it's very special. Definitely going to keep listening to Slayer and other thrash metal bands. Next album was Hopelessness by Anoni. This album was released this year and was the first solo album released by Anoni after releasing several albums as the lead singer of the band, Anthony and the Johnsons. This album is kind of a blend of electronic pop, experimental rock, and synth pop, and actually wasn't bad, but her singing voice just made me feel a bunch of different ways. Her singing voice is very deep, almost making her sound like a very feminine man, and it took some time to actually get used to her singing voice on this record. The music itself, though, was very solid, and so yeah, not a bad record at all. Next album was Bellissima by Pizzicato 5. I recently discovered this really cool Japanese band who partially led the movement of music in Japan known as Shibuya-kei, which is basically blending J-pop, new wave, jazz, soul, R&B, and funk all together. Of course, all the vocals were in Japanese, but that didn't stop me from really enjoying this record. Amazing music on here. It's from 1988, so it blends a lot of those styles that were really popular during that era, especially in terms of pop music. Definitely recommend checking this record out. Very unique. Next album was Brothers from the Black Keys. Even though I have two Black Keys albums in my collection, this one being one of them, this was my first time listening through a Black Keys album all the way through. I'm a sucker for lo-fi garage rock, and this album certainly delivers that. Really great music by a great duo. This was released in 2010, so not a long time ago, but it was released, if it was released that long ago, it certainly has aged well, because this album was really fun to listen to. I've been meaning to get into the Black Keys for a while, so now is probably as good a chance as any. But yeah, Brothers is really good if you want to listen to a band or an album with some lo-fi, indie rock, blues rock, or garage rock with tinges of neo-psychedelia. Okay, next album was Sparkle Sparkle by Holy White Hounds. This album is like brand new, fresh out of the music oven. I saw it being advertised on YouTube actually, and decided to check it out. Gotta say, I wasn't disappointed. This is a pretty tight album. It's like light garage rock with inflections of indie pop, and pop punk, and even having a little bit of funk elements added as well. To make an accurate comparison, this album is kind of like the Black Keys' work minus the extreme lo-fi production. So if you like the Black Keys or like maybe early Fall Out Boy, you'd probably like this. Anyways, yeah, this album was a pretty nice listen. Not the most unique album I've heard this year. I've heard albums with this style of music a million times over, but still, definitely not a bad album. Good to hear more indie rock this year. The next album was Isla by Kevin Gates. I would be lying to you if I told you that I enjoyed this album, even in the slightest. I really did not like this project at all. It sounded so promising at the beginning, but the more and more it went on, I just couldn't stand it. I love when rappers say that they're not talking about the same stuff that other rappers are talking about on their albums, yet that's exactly what they do. This album was your basic run-of-the-mill hip-hop album. The beats were dry and extremely cookie-cutter. The rapping wasn't much better, and aside from that, it's lengthy, which many hip-hop albums are, but in this case, its length makes it worse. It honestly felt like a chore to get through this album, and as a matter of fact, I couldn't even get through all of it. I listened to like 13 out of the 17 tracks that there were before I said that's enough and stopped. That's how much I dislike this record. I've heard some really good hip-hop this year already, but this certainly wasn't one of them, which is a shame because I was kind of looking forward to hearing this one. It turned out to be a disappointment with uninspired beats and some very corny lines. Definitely the worst album I've heard so far this year. Next album was Tyrannosaurus Hives by The Hives. This is a 2004 album that sounds like a late 80s / early 90s pop-punk record. It's really aggressive, obviously taking a lot of cues from, as I said earlier, punk rock and pop-punk, and adding some garage rock to the mix. The tracks are really short and the music is solid. Really great if you want something fast, in your face, but also really short. Next album was Adrenaline by the Deftones. This is their debut album from 1995, and for a debut album, this was pretty impressive. This album shows early signs of what would become nu metal, a huge movement during the early to mid-2000s, but this album is more so post-punk and alternative metal, so of course, it's heavy stuff. I did enjoy this album, probably not as much as I enjoy other thrash or black metal, but still a cool album, and very good for a first release. The next album is Word Gets Around by Stereophonics, another debut album from 1997 by a Welsh band that's a bit different. Despite being Welsh, though, this is a Britpop or post-Britpop album, kind of switching between a very light pop-rock style on some tracks and having a heavier alternative rock style in some others. By this point, the Britpop movement was very popular, fusing some American rock styles with elements of light English progressive rock and electronic pop. This was a really cool album, good if you're into pop rock that's not synth-heavy and mostly contains live instruments or alternative rock. Finally, we have Pang by Stereolab. The final album I listened to was the 1992 release of English band Stereolab. I have to say, the majority of the music on here I seriously enjoyed. It blended so many different styles of music and was just all around cool. However, there was one thing that kind of hindered my listening experience, and that was how long some of these tracks dragged on at the end. Now, if you've ever heard this album, I'm sure you might be thinking what I'm about to say. This is a noise rock album. In some aspects, it's supposed to be that way, making extended collages of sound within the songs. But for me, it became a bit annoying, and for most of the tracks, by the time the vocals were done, and they were just repeating the same riff over and over and over again for a whole minute and a half, I would skip to the next song. Now, some tracks where the noise parts come in between the verses or whatever, those are perfectly fine. But when a 2.5 minute track would go on for an extra minute and a half by repeating the same short instrumental part 30 times over, that just really grated on me. As for the music itself, it mixed noise rock with garage rock and punk, all while blending elements of dream pop and shoegaze, here and there, of course. Each track felt different from the last, so it would consistently keep things fresh, except for those extended noise parts. Other than that, I did enjoy this album. Anyways, that does it for this episode of albums I listened to this week. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed. And if you did enjoy, please hit that like button and also subscribe if you want to see more. And if there is like an album that you think I should listen to throughout the week at some point or whenever, just leave a comment down below or check out my Facebook or my Twitter. The links are in the description. But anyways, I will see you all in the next video. So long.